So when Trump says join the 51st state, other people are coming in, they're saying, okay, what's the counter argument to not joining the 51st state? What are the benefits of staying Canadian? And they can't give one. Oh, you'll get free healthcare. Well, wait a minute, I'm paying into healthcare and I'm not getting healthcare. You know, like I blow out my knee and they tell me I got to wait a year and a half. I could be dead in a year and a half. Like give me another argument, you know? We have good education. Well, not really. You have drag queen story hour.
Peyman Askari, my favorite poli-sci nerd, my brother. Dude, I love you. I fucking love you. I'm so glad we're doing this on my podcast. I've been on yours a bunch of times. In lay terms is one of my favorite listens, dude. I love it, dude. Like, I'm kind of a bird's eye view generalist, mostly due to my lack of, my lack of high level of intelligence. I would like to think I'm of average intelligence. But you go deep into the weeds, man. And you really helped me to understand some very complicated concepts with your show. So I guess we'll start by asking, how you doing, brother? That was a really long introduction.
No, that was a great introduction. I'm doing good. I always struggle. So if you watch In Lay Terms, you should watch how awkward I am when I introduce people. I'm nervous. The show gets better as it goes on, but the first intro, I always suck at it.
Oh, dude, when I have like people on that I haven't spoken to before, like, especially like, big public figures, I'm like having a fucking heart attack for the first 10 minutes because I'm just terrified that I'm going to get this off on a bad foot and this guy's going to, or lady they're going to fucking hate me. So I'm always like super nervous and freaked out and like holding my breath and I'm saying like the wrong words. And, like once those nerves begin, you just start spiraling out of control, So it's like you kind of need the guest to like rein you back in because you're just going off into nothing,
Yeah. If you watch my episodes, sometimes you can tell I haven't slept much. The guest stops talking and I'm like, so how's the weather today?
So Peyman, I wanted to have you on the show to talk about this collapsing country that you and I reside in. You and I have talked about it on your show a number of times, but you're such a gracious host. You rarely weigh in with your own opinions and views. And I know you're a really smart guy. And I would probably categorize you as a constitutionalist libertarian. And would I be correct in that assessment?
Yeah, I could also go with individualist.
Okay, cool. And you guys are my favorite people because, you're very by the book and you're very much committed to the rule of law and the rights and entitlements that are written into our pieces of paper that our governments frequently take it upon themselves to either bypass or just walk all over, right? And So I guess I want to open by asking a really general question. I mean, what are your main concerns as it relates to Canada and also our current position geopolitically?
Let me answer that in the form of a story.
Okay.
I said I'm an individualist. The last few years, but specifically the last few weeks, it's been a journey of self-discovery for me. I came to Canada in 1989. 1995, we had that Quebec referendum. I was living in BC. I remember even as a kid, like patriotism, I had fully become Canadian. I was a patriot and I was losing my mind with Quebec. I was like, how dare they think that they can steal our land? Like that province, I didn't see it as their land. I saw it as ours. And I hated the Quebecois. Today, if Quebec wants to leave, I'll be like, sure, whatever. I don't know. That's great. No biggie, less equalization payments. And partially, it's because of this post-nationalist nightmare that both Trudeaus have unleashed upon us. But it's also because the government's just been beating us up. So the last 10 years, like this whole patriotism thing, essentially, that's what a nation is. The patriotism thing has been used against us. So I'm like, you know what? My first responsibility is to individualism. I want to be a happy person. I want to be a proud Canadian, but the most important thing is that I'm a happy person. You know that I'm running for office. When I talk to the voters, and voters aren't as brain dead as people like to think that they are, they identify the problems. their small businesses being wiped out because the government is outbidding them for employers, the $2,000, whatever the loans to the employees to stay at home. They can't get healthcare. Like, all of these things are individual issues. They don't hate Canada, but their first priority is themselves, and then their family, and then the next priority is the country.
Yeah, and I think that's correct. I mean, I was listening to John Paul Berg on your podcast, which everybody listening, if you want a really good listen, go to In Lay Terms on Rumble and listen to the recent episode with John Paul Berg, because he's so on point. It's unbelievable. But he said something that really resonated with me. He said, I'm about the welfare of Canadians, not Canada. Put Canadians first, not Canada first. And those are two separate things, right? And in my view, I feel like Canada as a nation, as a British colonial experiment, is on its last legs. Like, we're at the end, man. And we have to decide, Canadians have to decide what we're going to be moving forward. And there are a number of options on the table for us. There are a number of directions we can go. So as an individualist, I want to ask you, I mean, what direction do you think would be most beneficial for Canadians? And I'll add another layer to this, for Western Canadians, because for my American listeners, we have a lot of listeners in the United States, which is nuts. It's most of the audience, and most of the recent episodes have been very Canadian centered. So I think people are interested in learning more about us. We're like Martians from outer space, right? And so there is a big difference between Western Canada and Eastern Canada. So I want to ask you that question as well. Like, what is the best way forward for Western Canadians?
Well, the easiest way forward, obviously, is to join the U.S. and that. So let's start from here. The problem that we're having right now is that we're not addressing the corruption. So the government's getting so big, 20% of our GDP is public sector. They're getting these like gold-plated pensions, and you're getting a two-tiered society. So when I said that they beat us up over the last decade, that's sort of what I'm talking about. So rather than addressing that, because we don't have leadership, there's a massive leadership vacuum with the Liberal Party and the NDP. Nobody's stepping forward and saying, all right, we hear you, citizens. We understand now that we made a mistake, and we're going to roll it back. And here's our 10-year plan to do that. Instead, what they're doing is like, all right, guys, we're going to jettison the Ukraine flag, and we're going to hold up the Canadian flag, but we're still going to represent the same things we did before, socialism. So it's pushing Canadians towards the U.S. I've talked to a lot of people much smarter than me, and they say, it's our best option to get away from England and go to the U.S. My only concern is that Canada, you could think of ourselves as like an addict. Now, whether you want to think of ourselves as a drug addict or a gambling addict, we have this addiction to spending money and getting free things, getting the government to spend money on behalf of us. And that's not going to go away just because we join the U.S., like getting 1A and 2A, that we're not going to turn into responsible citizens. I would rather us get there ourselves. But the time, it's running out. Trump has his eye on Alberta. I think he wants the energy resources. And if he manages to do that, and if he destabilizes the country and Alberta leaves, nothing Peyman Askari, say can stop that. That's my view.
And I completely agree. And I was holding a cough the entire time because what you said was so brilliant. I'm going to clip that out for sure. So I was like, don't fuck this up. I completely agree. I completely agree with that. And I think the smartest thing for us to do at this point in time, at least for Western Canada, is to join the United States. It's the easiest way out. But I think from a realistic perspective, it's the only way out, right? Either that or we go down with the ship. I know this is an old cliche analogy, but it is really like we're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? And, you just highlighted that in that beautiful little segment there. We're scrambling to try to not change anything while at the same time change everything. And it's just not working, and I talk to a lot of people in my community and a lot of people on my outer orbit, and everybody in Canada feels the same way. Like, this is it. We're at the end of the road and we're hitting a fork. and we have to decide what we're going to do. And I think Western Canada, even Eastern Canada, we're all generally of the same view that like maybe joining the United States isn't such a bad idea. And of course, you know, the main criticism is, well, don't you love your free healthcare? It's not free, you fucking morons, you fucking retards. It's actually more expensive for us if you break it down per capita and you're a healthy person. We as Canadians pay more for our garbage healthcare system than Americans do on insurance. So it's not free. And just a little story here, I'll share a story myself. I found out last week that I've been walking around with a hernia for 20 years.
Ooh.
Okay, I've been going to doctor after doctor after doctor because I have pain in my groin. And originally the doctors that I saw when it originally happened were like, well, it's just it's a muscle strain. Don't worry about it. It'll go away. Well, that strain, the aches and pains have existed for 20 years, 19 years to be exact. Now they found the hernia and I have to wait for who knows, some inordinate period of time to just get a consultation with a surgeon. That doesn't get me into the surgery, right? Whereas by comparison, and Canadians listening to this, I have lived in the United States for long stretches of time. I can tell you this for sure. Not only is the quality of life better in the United States, not only do they make more money and have a lower cost of living, but if I had have gotten this hernia in the United States when I was 23 years old and I went to a doctor, I would have had the MRI, the ultrasound, and the surgery probably within a week. But I'm in Canada and now I'm on a waiting list to get a call from a surgeon that I can't choose, right? So my name gets picked out of a hat. So I may get a good surgeon, I may get a bad surgeon. I don't get to choose my surgeon. I have to wait for whoever pulls my name out of a hat to call me, bring me in for a consultation and explain to me what's going to happen. And then I have to book the surgery, which could be, you know, however many more months or years into the future. And so I'm saying all this to kind of highlight how upside down and backwards our country is. And I feel like we are coming to a head. We are at the break point. We are at the point where either this thing completely collapses or something better emerges from it, right? Do you feel the same?
I do. Let's take the health. First of all, I hope everything works out with the hernia thing.
I'm fine. It's all
you're
good.
You're one of our better podcasters. We don't want to lose you.
Oh, thanks, brother.
Regarding the healthcare, like everybody says that immigration is the central issue because it impacts everything else: education, healthcare, the economy. You could make the same argument with healthcare. So when I talk to some immigrants, they say like, "Oh, I came here, but I can't work because I'm a physician," and they think that's. I'm not advocating for bringing in foreign doctors, but the reason that happens is because you have one set of, let's call them stakeholders or decision makers in Ottawa. They're like, "Yeah, we're just going to bring in 1 million people." And you have another set of decision makers. This cartel of the College of Physicians at the provincial level, federal, and international level. They got one in the US and one in Europe as well. They decide how many doctors a year are trained through in BC, the University of British Columbia, what the requirements are and, how much they have to pay for residency and all of this stuff, how much they get paid, sorry. And in addition to that, they also decide like if your finger is cut, this is how much we're going to pay you to stitch it up versus if it's broken, this is how much we'll pay you. So it's a Soviet system. My personal belief, the reason that healthcare is such a top of mind issue with the voters is because they feel that like they can't express it, that it's a Soviet communist system, but they feel it. And that's why it's falling apart. It's not just that there's more bureaucracy. It's not just that people in government are incompetent, which they are. It's a top-down command economy. And I'm amazed that it's survived this long. That's my view on healthcare. But I can't remember how we got into this. I think what I was going to say is, in the absence of a counter argument, someone's argument spreads like wildfire. So when Trump says join the 51st state, other people are coming in. They're saying, okay, what's the counter argument to not joining the 51st state? what are the benefits of staying Canadian? And they can't give one. Oh, you'll get free healthcare. Well, wait a minute. I'm paying into healthcare and I'm not getting healthcare. You know, like I blow out my knee and they tell me I got to wait a year and a half. I could be dead in a year and a half. Like give me another argument. You know, we have good education. Well, not really. You have drag queen story hour. I can't think of anything. I can't think of a single thing. And I was watching Frank Vaughn the other day. He's usually a serious guy and he drives me insane. He never stops rambling, but it was hilarious. He called Canada a resource colony. He's like, we're bringing in millions of people. We're just a resource colony. We're not a nation.
Dude. Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I was, you know, I live in a small town in Alberta, and, you know, the topic of joining the United States is something that is often, well, recently, very often discussed amongst neighbors and people at the grocery store and so on and so forth in my community. And somebody said to me, a mom in my community said, well, I would just be so concerned about my children entering the American education system. And I just looked at her. I was like, are you fucking crazy? Like, you're talking about your children receiving a gold star education in comparison to ours. Now, the American education system has its problems for sure, but what's becoming clear to me as I talk to average everyday people in this country is that they don't know anything about the outside world or what's happening in it. And your comparisons to, you know, to the Soviet Union are very accurate, because I feel like the Canadian population, I'm talking mainstream Canadians, are very much in this strange kind of Soviet-esque bubble where they don't have any clue what's actually going on. It's like the rest of the world is just moving forward without them. And they're trapped in this weird paradoxical place where, like, Trump wants to take them over and rule them like a tyrannical Hitlerian figure. And, you know, they're just trying to preserve what little bits they have left, what little bits the Trudeau liberals have given them. And they don't realize that, like, the world is far better outside of here. Do you encounter the same thing?
Yeah, as you were talking, I was trying to think of an analogy, like maybe a dying star, you know, like it's burned up all its fuel and then it explodes in a supernova, or some science fiction movie where the bad guy loses his mind and he's gonna, you know, sets to self-destruct to kill everybody on board.
Right.
I feel it's the same way with Trudeau. They realize they've lost, and they're using the media to try to just explode the country. I'm talking about getting Carney in by creating Trump as this big bad boogeyman, and they're not addressing the main issue, but they're whipping people up into a frenzy. I mentioned the Ukraine flag. I almost overnight. The memo almost went out to every single liberal, you know, like they're sleeping and they wake up, you know, they're implanted chip. They're like, oh, Canada flag, good. Like all of a sudden it switched to now they're embracing the Canadian flag. And when I go to town halls, people almost have to coach me. My advisors are like, whatever you do, like, don't say anything good about Trump. And it's the number one question that comes up. They're like, what are your views on Trump? They want me to discredit Trump. And I just, like, the media has brainwashed them over the last few decades. And in the I get about 20 seconds. That's how much time I have to make my pitch. I can't reverse the damage that the media has done in that 20 seconds. When you say that they're completely oblivious of what's going on in the outside world, it's because we have state-controlled media in Canada. The CBC, the billions they get through the CBC, the hundreds of millions they give to the other print media. So all the legacy media has been completely controlled. And I don't know if you're on the social media space as much as I am, but I'm seeing a lot of these bought and paid for people. Max Fawcett hates Alberta. Andrew Coyne, I don't know which intelligence agency he works for. Legally Purdy came out and she's a cheerleader for the Carney campaign. Like, there's a whole bunch of these guys that are being co-opted.
And so, to be clear, before just to clarify for the listeners, you're a PPC candidate in West Vancouver. You are the PPC, for our American listeners, is the People's Party of Canada. It's our Libertarian Party, correct?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so just to move on, because I thought people might get confused when talking about being in town halls and stuff. Yeah, dude, absolutely. And that's the part that kind of freaks me out is like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I live in my world, you know, and I'm like listening to inlay terms and I'm talking to Sam Cooper and reading the Bureau. And so like when I'm looking for Canadian news, like I know exactly where to access it, like the real people, right? Um, but it is kind of scary, like how many of these people are still paying attention to state funded media. And now the question I ask is, especially with the boomer generation, is it just because it's all they know? Like I've been thinking when I hear these people speak. I'm like, maybe this is just they've just been conditioned into believing that this is actual information, and so they just by force of habit watch legacy media or read legacy print media and form their opinions in that, you know, based on that, you know, because that's just what they've always done. And so therefore they're never going to leave that. Do you get that same sense?
Yeah, I think you're 100% spot on. The decline of mainstream media, I think, is related to the boomer generation being on their way out, and they're going to take it with them. And I get the feeling the younger generations, 20, 30-year-olds, they have this like good riddance sort of perspective mentality. They're like, take it with you and get the hell out of here. Let us fix this mess that you've created. Now, it's not all the boomers' fault. I'm not trying to jump on that bandwagon. Jordan Peterson did an interview with Rex Murphy, may he rest in peace,
Yeah.
and he expressed this really well. He goes, like, if you go to people and you say either believe me when I say one thing, or believe the media, the government, the banks, academia, education, it's just it's a lot easier for them. It seems logical to side with the media. I remember when the vaccines came out, I told my dad, I'm like, you know, make whatever decision you want. Just make sure it's an informed decision. Here are the risks with the vaccine. It's not a vaccine. It's a gene therapy. And he said to me, well, if it's not a vaccine, why would the media lie to me about it? I didn't have an answer for him, right? But the point is, it's hard to deprogram people like that.
Yeah. And the real challenge is in doing so, right? Like you immediately get boxed into a corner as a conspiracy theorist because the media is trained, the legacy media has trained people who still pay attention to them to view anybody who's, you know, has an unorthodox or a and even saying unorthodox is ridiculous because it's just reality, right? Like they've trained these people into thinking that people who are somewhat tethered to reality or have actual, you know, facts and information at their disposal, that they're, you know, some crazy kooky basement dwelling, you know, nut job, right? And it's hard to pull people out of that. Like even with my own parents, like thankfully, you know, my stepdad during the pandemic, he found Lou Rockwell, which is like way off the like, brother. If you've never read Lou Rockwell before, you need to read him. He's got like my stepdad basically jumped into the fucking middle of the Indian Ocean in terms of if you want to talk about quote unquote conspiracy theories, right? Excuse me, but Lou was Lou was correct in his original assumptions of what the COVID-19 pandemic was, and he red pilled my stepdad. So thankfully, you know, my parents are a little bit more open minded, but they still watch the nightly news, right? Like I still talk to them and find myself having to contend with, you know, the garbage that enters their living room, and so. No, I mean, it's true, right? Like I talk to my mom and I'm just like, Mom, where did you hear that? That's fucking insane. I don't say the F word, but you know what I mean. And like, you know, she doesn't want to tell me because she knows, she's well aware that I have this podcast and that I, you know, I talk to my fellow conspiracy theorists from our basements. But you know, like I know where it's all coming from, and it's really hard to listen to. Like, you know, I know I'm kind of rambling here, but I'll share a story really quick. Like when when Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau started freezing bank accounts in response to the Freedom Convoy, I panicked because I went online and I found the donor list that they were using to attack people, and my email was on it. And I fucking panicked, dude, because I was like, I'm going to lose everything, you know, and I have 2 children and a wife, right? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not a crazy person. My money, beyond that, my money belongs to me, even if I was crazy. And I was panicking, man. I was driving around for days because the bank wouldn't let me remove all my money at once. So I had to take it out in $2,000 increments from ATM machines. And I told my mom, and my mom said, well, why would you do that? And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, well, why would you have donated to that protest? And she didn't, like, you know what I mean? Like, that was her initial reaction, was like, well, the government's all powerful and they can just randomly decide to seize your bank accounts and your assets. And it was an illuminating moment for me, because it showed me how little most Canadians are aware of their own rights, you know? And I think that's where we are. It's just like Canadians have been slowly conditioned to kind of accept their lives as subjects and serfs of tyranny. And so, you know, yourself as somebody who's entered the world of politics and as somebody who's campaigning as a PPC candidate, I mean, if we emerge from this better than we were before, what do you see? Like, what's your vision for the future?
It's very much, it's in line with what you said. Like, you're making a property rights argument, right? You own your money. You're a sovereign individual. The government doesn't own you. I take it a little bit further. I don't say this to the voters. They would think I'm crazy. But I say that there is no government. Like, the government, it doesn't exist. It's like a strata council. A strata council doesn't exist. Yeah, you own a unit, and you got some people that sit on the strata council board, but it's the owners of the building, the units in the building, that matter. It's their will that matters. And Canada, we had this worked well until the 90s, maybe even like just before 9/11, where you had individuals living and working amongst each other, and they had a system of what do you call it, arbitration, or dealing with resolution, conflict resolution. We call it the rule of law. At some point after 9/11 until now, this cloud has emerged over this concept of rule of law that's called the government, and the government operates above the rule of law. The government can do whatever it wants. So it can take your money if it has to come up with some flimsy argument to make it seem like they're legitimate. But this protest was an insurrection, so we're going to steal Jason James's money, and we can do it because we have his mother on our side, and his family, and his neighbors. My vision for Canada is, like, I just want to be free. People need to be individually responsible, and through that you can get individual liberty. But Canada, we're not responsible. I look at Canada like from the perspective of an immigrant. When you're trying to attract people from anywhere, it doesn't have to be the third world. They come to a fork in the road. They see America, there's liberty, and then they see Canada, there's safety and security. Canada says you can go to America and you'll be successful. You have to work hard at it, but if you slip through the cracks, you're screwed. Come to Canada, we're America light. You'll never really be successful, but you're not going to die. We'll give you healthcare. We'll give you education. And this is like a sinkhole, a gravity well that attracts all the socialists. So all of these like idiot loser socialists, they're coming here, and they've reached critical mass. So now we have this like socialist black hole. I'm getting kind of colorful with the analogy, and they're pushing our country over a cliff. So that's how I see where we are, and where do I want it to go? Individual liberty, entrepreneurial spirit, kind of thing.
And what's really sad is that we as Canadians, and just as a country, we have the capacity to do that. I mean, we're one of the largest land masses on Earth. We only have a population of 40 million, and we really could. I mean, we have more than enough space to let our innovators and our entrepreneurs flourish, right? And I was talking to an oil and gas executive not long ago, and we were talking about all of these failed oil and gas projects. Like, he was just listing them off, just the billions of dollars that were invested in Canada and then withdrew at the last second because they realized there were just too many regulations, and the bureaucracy was just too big. and that they were never going to be able to actually complete the projects or complete them in the way they wanted to, right? And he was saying, he was like, like, we could have, I mean, we could be trillions of dollars wealthier than we are. And like he was saying, it's not a matter of like, just take off all the guardrails and let people drill all day, every day. He's like, what we're asking for is just the ability to do our job. And we can't even do that. And you think about that on a micro level, like that's why so many entrepreneurs leave Canada. I mean, I could think off the top of my head at least 5 who are mega successful who did it from the United States, because Canada does not foster innovation and entrepreneurship. As you said earlier, it attracts people who just want to leech off of the social programs, right? So let's talk about immigration, because yourself, you're an immigrant. You're the son of immigrants. Your parents made it out in time before the Iranian Revolution ate everything. And so as somebody who has like a family lineage that extends into, a complete and total, I don't know, destruction of a thriving nation, how do you view what's happening right now? And how do your parents view this?
Everybody is opposed to the mass immigration. I've started reaching out to other immigrants in the community, and I'm always hesitant. Like I said, 1995, I was fully integrated, assimilated into Canadian culture. Some of these other immigrants, either they're relatively new, they came here when they were older, or their heart is just back home wherever they are. They every year they go back a couple of times, so they don't really assimilate. And I approach it very delicately, and I ask them what their views are, and it's amazing. Every single one of them is opposed to mass immigration. I asked one guy yesterday, and he said, when he came here 10 years ago, Canada had a culture. So Trudeau, if you're watching this, go fuck yourself. A culture. And he goes, everybody would smile. Everybody would, there was never any trash. If you saw trash, you would pick it up. Everybody was healthy. They're athletic. And he said, partially it's because of the economy that's strained. Nobody is really healthy anymore. No one smiles anymore. He's starting to see trash. And he didn't go into detail, but he said a lot of these cultures that are coming, their culture is not compatible with Canadian culture. They're not polite. Maybe their views towards women. And he stopped there. But that is one example. I could probably give like a dozen more of immigrants who do not support this level of immigration.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, I have a lot of immigrants in my community, and it's the same thing. Every person I talk to is like, do you realize that, Trudeau is destroying the country with just waves of unchecked immigrants? And, excuse me. I'm sorry, everybody. I have a cold I'm fighting through. Dominic Barton, I can't remember what the council's name is, but Dominic Barton, who's an advisor to Justin Trudeau, who was the head of McKinsey, which just got slapped with one of the biggest fines in American history for illegally promoting opioids. So you can kind of guess what kind of guy he is. He's the former ambassador to China, which again, okay,
shocking, yeah.
Right. Well, he's part of this council where they have a plan to grow Canada's population to 100 million people by the year 2100. And they're going to do their plan was to do that mostly through immigration. And so when I talk to people in my community, they're like, you don't understand. Like, we left, we jumped through the hoops, we paid the money, we went through the processes and the mountains of paperwork and background checks. And, there's a series of tests that you have to do to become a permanent Canadian resident in Canada. And now Trudeau and the Liberals are just passing these people through. And in a lot of cases, subsidizing their stay, giving them a daily allowance or a monthly allowance, right? Like, and that's coming out of our pockets. And the people who are most angry about this are the people who went through the processes. Because my argument has always been, as an immigrant, to become a Canadian almost makes you more Canadian than being born here, because you have to go through all of the steps, which are just absurd and tedious. Right? If you've ever dealt with the Canadian government on any level, you know how fucking moronic everything is when dealing with them. Now imagine being an immigrant trying to become a naturalized citizen, and these people are just watching these cultures and all of the things that they left behind just wash up in their neighborhoods and on their doorsteps. And it's like, well, if I wanted that, then I should have just stayed where I came from, right?
Yeah, like a lot of it, even I don't understand. So the century initiative you're talking about, getting to 100 million, I don't know what their end game is. The deputy mayor of Toronto, this woman, they always do this when they want to piss conservatives off. They either put a woman on or a minority. In this case, it's a minority woman with a hijab. And she said, we have to give a path to citizenship for all permanent resident holders and illegals. You know, like they're testing the waters. And I don't know what their end game is. I think they're just like bleeding heart liberals, and they just think, you know, that they're in the right. Partially, it's I blame the media. On the one hand, they're pushing this ideology of there's this plan, right? They're moving forward with this mass immigration. On the other hand, they're keeping us fighting each other by using the media to flare up emotions about Donald Trump, right? Or flare up the emotions about Ukraine. I don't know if you noticed, but in the last few days, they tried to push this narrative that Canada is going to support Ukraine all on its own. Good luck, buddy. Yeah. Let me know.
Yeah. My comment I wrote on X, I said, Canada's going to guarantee Ukraine security. Like, what the fuck are we doing? What are we giving them rape whistles? Like, how would we even do that?
Wooden guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I don't know what their end game is. I don't think they have a plan. So you're my age. I don't know if you remember when the Soviet Union, there was that coup d'etat against Gorbachev.
Yeah.
Gorbachev was reforming and these generals came out and they put him under house arrest. And then they did a press conference and the generals were shaking. Like they had no plan. They knew how to take over, but they didn't know how to govern. And I suspect they have no plan. Like they're just trying to cling on to power with Carney. But I don't think their plan is going to work, whatever it is.
I hope it doesn't. Because I think if, you know, I've been thinking about this a lot lately because it really does feel like boomers and just mainstream Canadians are going to somehow be grifted into voting Liberal in this next election if we get one. And that's a big if. And I was thinking about, well, what's the outcome if Mark Carney becomes our next semi-legitimate prime minister? And it's not good. And I don't see Alberta specifically, but the West generally, being a part of Canada within 2 years of that government, within two years of that government being assembled in Parliament. I just don't see how we could possibly stay. I mean, at that point, it's a matter of survival, right?
Let's do a thought experiment. I mean, on the one hand, if you want to be conspiratorial, this could be the globalists saying, we're not going to throw in the towel with Donald Trump. We will destabilize this nation to their north, and we'll hold on to it for as long as we can, and we'll push some socialism, maybe get some drugs across the border. I could see them doing that. They are evil, these City of London bankers. Other than that, I mean, so the Liberals get Carney in, and what are they going to do? Invoke the Emergencies Act, CBDC? Like, how are they going to run a country without any economy is my question.
That's a good point. And, I've been thinking about that too. Because, with this whole Trump tariff thing and this joke about, this troll about the 51st state, there's something real behind that. There's this idea about annexing Canada. And the thing that we have to, this idea about annexing Canada that really has legs. And the thing that we have to remember is that the Arctic is incredibly valuable, especially now as the United States and China seem to be on a path to war. The Arctic is going to be critical. And as it stands right now in Canada, we don't have a military capable of defending the Arctic. When you go up to the Arctic, any military installments that you see up there, they're all American. And I think that's where the United States is kind of thinking. Like, they want access to our resources, of course, right? And, Trump was talking about Keystone XL the other day and wanting to build that pipeline from Alberta into the United States, which again, is another reason why Alberta really needs to think seriously about our future as Canadians. But I think that there's some real concerns underlying it all, as Sam Cooper has outlined on the Bureau over and over and over again. I think China is Trump's major concern. But I also think it has to do with territory, and it also has to do with them being aware that there are these really fucking evil globalist banking elites that are at work, that are intentionally destabilizing our nations and are intentionally destabilizing Canada. But you made a good point, right? Like if there's no economy, then right, what are the Liberals? What do they have to work with? So? Let me ask you this: what are your views on Mark Carney? What do you think of him as a political candidate?
Like, I don't really know much about him besides what the media has told me, which is in itself is kind of scary. I know that he's destroyed two countries through the banking policy, specifically, or more recently, England. It doesn't pass the smell test. Trudeau is on the decline. All of last year, the last half of last year, he's on the decline, and the media all of a sudden takes a more neutral stance. If you recall, there was that incident with Jagmeet Singh where the reporter pressed him. He's like, "We need to get harder on the Liberals." He's like, "Yeah, but you're the one that's propping him up, right?" That was like the closest the media in Canada has come in the last 10 years to being objective. And then overnight, they parachute Carney in, and I was looking at his messaging, like the posts he was putting out, the speeches he was crafting, and it was better than anything Trudeau had done in the last 10 years. It was better than anything Pierre Poilievre has done in the last 18 months. And I'm asking, where did this guy get this machinery for getting a campaign up and running? It doesn't happen overnight. Even if you have millions of dollars, it takes a month or so. So I'm just going to throw some words out there, like Perkins Coie comes to mind, Fusion GPS. I'm guessing they went to the Hillary campaign and they're like, well, just give us whatever you guys had. And when I say they, I'm talking about the bankers. So the bankers brought this guy in, and they're trying. To me, it seems like they're trying to use Canada as their final chess piece against Trump. That's how I see Carney. I don't really see him as a person. I don't know what his role was at the Bank of Canada. I don't know his track record. I'm just looking at him as a vessel for other interests.
And so as a vessel for other interests, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but your view of him is that he is just a vessel for other interests. He doesn't really have an interest in being the Prime Minister of Canada, but rather he's more or less being installed by these outside interests as a chess piece against the United States.
It seems like it, and it's this liberal machine, right? It's not just the Liberal Party. It's this concept of progressivism. So everything underneath that organization, from the NGOs, the climate change movement, which is kind of imploding, transgenderism, all the NGOs associated with that, these urban centers with all of these brain dead voters, and the Toronto Star, like all of these things. They're looking to Carney and saying, allow us to exist. That's how I see Carney. He's enabling that progressivism.
Yeah. Excuse me. I'm sorry, everybody. I know that's super annoying. I'm holding in my coughs while Peyman's talking because I don't want to wreck some pretty good gems that he's bringing out here. Okay, so then in that case, what I do want to talk about too is look, at this point it's a foregone conclusion. Mark Carney is going to win Liberal leadership. The fact that there's I don't even call them debates. I just call it a bunch of people on a stage kind of reinforcing whatever Carney says, right? Because that's essentially what they're doing. This whole Liberal leadership thing is just complete theater. We know it's going to be Mark Carney. So Mark Carney is elected Liberal leader. Justin Trudeau steps down. He becomes our unelected Prime Minister. Now, there were two things that you mentioned earlier that I kind of want to explore here for a second before we have to wrap it up. Number one is central bank digital currencies. And number two is the Emergencies Act, because he did say something that was quite interesting not too long ago about declaring a national state of emergency in response to Trump's tariffs. And that were he to do so, they would be able to constitutionally, like legally within their rights, suspend elections. Am I correct in that? Do you have more information, or do you have a deeper view on that?
I shouldn't open my mouth and say anything because I don't know. Constitutionally, I don't know. That's a good question. I'll just say I don't know. I don't have a definitive answer.
Yeah, because that was something that a few people have brought up to me offline, and I've thought, wow, that's actually fucking terrifying. But see, the silver lining to all of this is I think that there are enough Canadians who have woken up to what's actually happening around us. And if he becomes unelected prime minister and we don't get an election like almost right away, and if they were to invoke the Emergencies Act and attempt to suspend our elections for an indefinite period of time, I just don't see how that doesn't trigger a revolution in this country.
I agree with that. So very quickly, 2022, our social contract was violated, the charter. So we went to Ottawa. Trudeau responded by bringing in the military, invoking martial law. And ever since then, we've been trying to get this guy out. He's dug in like an Alabama tick. He won't leave. So we're looking to the U.S. We're desperate. Our last option to get this jackass out is a foreign country. That's literally what this 51st state thing is. When he says the Emergencies Act, and again, I don't know if that you can annul an election or delay it, but something about monsters, like when they want to do something and they announce that they're going to do it, sometimes they're testing the waters, right? I gave you that example of the deputy mayor of Toronto suggesting that we should give a path of citizenship to illegals. What's another one of the reasons they're doing that? They're trying to test public response to that proposal. Ruby Dalla, I think her name was. She came out and she said we need to deport illegals. Michael Clark, I think the ginger gentleman, that sort of fat guy that also wanted to run for the election of the liberal leadership. He said we need a moratorium on immigration. I'm guessing these two both know they're never going to win. It's not beyond the realm of reason for the Liberal Party to say to these guys, you get some name recognition. We just want you to test this. We want to poll the Liberal base to see how well this resonates, to see if Mark Carney can use it. So when Mark Carney says, we might want to invoke the Emergencies Act, I think he's testing to see if he can use that.
Oh, interesting. Because, I mean, look, I just... Our Bill of Rights and just the framework, the constitutional framework in this country has been so violated repeatedly over the last 10 years that I just don't see how we get out of this peacefully. And again, like for our listeners, I want to make something clear. I am not advocating for violence at all against anyone. I read history voraciously. I'm telling you, revolutions never end well. But we're at a point where it's like they're pulling out all the stops. And as you said, we're desperately looking to the United States to do something. And I feel like if the United States were to do something and were it any other president, I would not estimate this as even a probability, but since it's Trump, I do give it like a 5% chance of happening. If we were to enter a situation where Mark Carney and the Liberals declare a state of emergency, our elections are suspended, not only does that trigger a revolution in Canada, but it also triggers military aid from the United States. It would have to, right? Because at that point, the country is so unstable that the United States is going to have to step in and try to stabilize it. Do you see a similar outcome?
Yeah, we're entering the realm of speculations. let's figure this. So how would Mark Carney approach this? He would say, we're in a state of emergency because of the tariffs. So it's an economic emergency, not a military one. Donald Trump has imposed tariffs. Our economy cannot function. We're taking control of the money supply. We will give relief to people. I think that they would play the sympathy card. It'd be a COVID all over again. Here's $2,000 checks. 2 weeks to flatten the economy. I don't know. 2 weeks to flatten the depression.
Flatten the economy.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I like that.
I don't know if Mark Carney is smart, but I'm sure he's got smart people around him, and they will say the only way that we can get through this without the U.S. crushing us is if we make it seem like the U.S. is the bad guy. So the tariffs are what's killing us. We're in this together. We have to give relief to the people, and they would have to checkmate Trump so that he can't send in the military. That would be their goal.
And I don't think they could, because at this point in time, Trump is a far more popular figure than Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney combined.
Yeah, but never underestimate the stupidity of a liberal. I mean, I'm sorry.
No, but it's true. It's true. It's true, and that's the hard part. The hard thing is that it's true, and it is. It's like there's this epidemic of stupidity in our country. Like these people don't realize. Like it's like, that old analogy of the frog in the pot and the heat slowly getting turned up, right? Well, it's like they've been sitting at boil for fucking 5 years. They've been boiling for 5 fucking years, man.
Yeah, the frog is definitely not jumping out of that pot.
Yeah,
take this thing right now, tariffs. Like everybody in Canada, not our circles, but ordinary people, they believe that Trump is responsible for these tariffs. One of my advisors, he told me, he goes, the Canadian dollar has dropped 40 cents. That's almost 39%, I think it's dropped. And he goes, that's a 39% tariff on U.S. products.
Yeah.
Why is no one talking about that? The carbon tax, they increased to 20%. Nobody talks about that, but they're whipped into a frenzy over these Trump tariffs. So that's on, I'm going to call it the left, the liberals, whatever, mainstream people. And then on the independent side, we're fighting each other. If I come out and say this, somebody will pull out something I said a few years ago or some family connection, be like, Peyman is a federal agent. So we're getting attacked from both sides, and we don't have a united front to fight this.
You get the Fed accusations too, because I get them every fucking day. Every day in my DMs, you're Fed. I'm like,
yeah.
Well, I don't know. I would imagine that the Feds would probably invest in a better studio setup than what we're working with, But,
yeah, people they're crazy. Like they don't call me directly a Fed. What they say is, it's usually one of my guests. Peyman, you had this guest on. I guess you're no longer incompetent. You're compromised. They say I'm compromised.
Oh yeah, I've had that too.
Yeah.
It's wild though, because it's like, at the end of the day, like I feel like you and I are kind of kindred spirits in that we're both just trying to figure shit out, right? Like we're both just curious, and you're far more intelligent than I, so you actually absorb a lot of things. But like we're just when I launched this podcast, it was supposed to be a supplementary, just a supplementary feature of my writing. Like I was going to do these every now and then, and then as our country continued to fracture and fall apart, and I was having these conversations with these, world-renowned, figures, people like Robert Malone and Jay Bhattacharya, and, both online and offline, they're like, hey man, what is going on up there? And, like you have these like these guys who really don't have to give a fuck about Canada at all, actually caring. And as it became more and more clear to me how bad the situation was, I kicked it up a notch and decided, okay, let's do a podcast, every week. And then we'll do like a break whenever I write something. But the podcast has become the main feature. And I think it's because, people see what's happening here, both inside and outside of the Canadian bubble. And, like with you, like, dude, every day there's like a new In Lay Terms episode. I'm like, holy shit, like, dude, you're the gift that keeps on giving, right? But it's like, I think we're both just motivated by, number one, trying to actually figure this out, but number two, trying to save it, right?
It's infuriating when, like, when I started my journey, maybe it's been like 5 years now, I was like, I see my country is falling apart. I see someone is destroying it, and I felt powerless to do something. So I figured I had to do something. And this podcast is my way of, not only am I doing something, I'm giving other Canadians the ability to participate in that movement, I guess, because it's very difficult for other Canadians. Not everybody can create a podcast, right? But they can come on my show to disable their camera and talk about the injustice in their community.
Yeah, and I love that you've done that, because you focus a lot on, I mean, you have public figures on your show, but you also have people on who are just average everyday people. And I love that, man. I want to do more of that. You've actually kind of inspired me in that direction. I'm thinking of doing some live streams where I just talk to like non-public figures and get their input on things. Because I talk to people in my community, and they have a tendency to say some really profound shit without knowing it, and you've done an excellent job in spotlighting that and finding people who have something to say, who have insights into things that, the commentators and the pundits don't. And I think we need more of that, man. We need to figure out a way to showcase like the real attitude and the real sense of despair in this country. Because that's really what it is. It's despair. It's
Well,
an absence of hope, right?
I have a manifesto I'm working on for I call it citizen podcasting. Like go on each podcasters have to go on each other's podcasts and start working together. Don't trash talk any other podcaster. If a podcaster trash talks you or a social media influencer, like, don't respond. And at the end of every one of your podcasts, encourage other people to do what you're doing to set up their own podcast. We need to democratize this podcast movement. What happens with influencers, podcasters, anybody with a show, once they hit a critical mass, not you, you're good. But once they hit a critical mass of viewers, everyone but you.
I was like, oh, here we go. He's about to shit on me right at the end. All right.
No, go ahead. But like, they sort of become the problem. They get this arrogance, and they stop bringing on ordinary people. They just get nasty. And I've had so many of these guys cut me off. So many of them discredit me publicly. I'm like, why the hell would you do that? If anything, you're just adding more viewers. Any publicity is good publicity.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I'll tell you, I'm not going to say their names publicly, but I have a list of people I'll never fucking talk to or interact with ever again. Right. Like for me, I try to be gracious with every interaction that I have. And, something I've seen you do, which I love, is, when people call you out or say things about you on social media, you'll jump in and say, hey, man, I'm just trying to be better. I'm just trying to be better. And I fucking love that, dude, because there's nothing anybody can say to argue that. And it's such a genuine, honest way. And I feel the same way. Like I'm not like king of the world, man. Like all I did was send a bunch of emails to people, ask them if they want to talk to me. Of course, all of the people in my immediate reach completely, thought I was insane for starting a podcast, wanted to have nothing to do with me. All the people on my outer orbit gave me the runaround. And it just so happened that like all of like my wish list guests were like the first people to say yes. So I was thrown in the deep end from the first episode of this podcast. I had Eva Chipyuk, and then second episode was Pierre Corey. Then the third episode's Robert Malone. Like, dude, I started in the fucking deep end, right? And it was just because all of the people that I thought would never say yes all said yes. And, I think that, like for me, I just try to maintain the same graciousness with people that those people gave me in the very beginning. Right. And so when somebody says something insane, like I've had people send me things that people have said about me online or on other podcasts or whatever. I don't give a fuck. I don't fucking care. If you see me as being relevant enough to mention my name and say some disparaging shit about me, then I'm obviously doing something right. Right.
What is that saying? If you haven't been called a racist, you're not working hard enough.
Yeah, it's funny. I had a lady in real life scream in my face and call me a Nazi after a little small, very balanced discussion about Trump. And I just said, well, my Filipino wife and Plains Cree Indian mother are going to be very disappointed to hear this about me.
Yeah, I was on a yeah, I know a similar thing with me. I was on an American podcast. They were interviewing me, and they asked me like, "What are the difficulties you're running with?" Because I'm running in for the People's Party. I'm like, "Yeah, they're calling me a racist." And this is a white guy. He's like, "Hold on, hold on." He's like, "They're calling you a racist?" And I was like, "Yeah, because I'm used to it. I thought it was normal." And he's like, "But aren't you like tanned all year round? Like, don't they see that you're a Middle Eastern?" It was
Yeah.
pretty funny. It was
Yeah, 100%, man. And not only that, but like not only are you Middle Eastern, brother, but you're the product of parents who escaped one of the most consequential revolutions in modern history, right? So it's not even like calling you a racist is wrong. It's like it's anathema to your very existence,
it's
right?
factually inaccurate.
So, my brother, well, listen, we'll do 1 or 2 more minutes here, and I just want to ask you one final question before we go. You mentioned central CBDC. You mentioned central bank digital currency earlier in this podcast. Can you talk a little bit more about that? What your view on a CBDC is, if we will see one in Canada, and if Mark Carney will be the person to bring it to us?
Sure, I'll answer it to the best of my ability. When I came here in the 90s, I was watching my father work. You go to we had a poster. I remember we went to frame a poster. We went to the shop, and we paid the guy cash, and you can kind of negotiate, and he says, "All right, I'll take the tax off." Well, you can't do that with taxes at all. But just the fact that you're paying cash is it's an interpersonal thing. Like, there is no third party involved. The government's not involved. The banks are not involved.
Yeah.
Credit cards, they've changed that now, because you have like a log of everything that you buy. So from cash to credit cards, and the next step is the CBDC, where the government has direct access to everything that you're buying in real time. So if people don't know a CBDC, you can think of it as like a Bitcoin, right? And the transactions are let's say immediate. There are other issues with CBDC that I also don't like. The fact that they can exercise more control over people. So the conspiratorial one is, they'll say you can't eat beef, or you've finished your quota of beef. You're trying to purchase something outside 15 minutes of your city. There are more sinister things, like they can get your income to retire. So the one thing that governments don't want is, they don't want you to save money. They just want you to spend money. Partially because if you have no savings, they can control you more. Mm-hmm. But they also want to stimulate the economy. So they could say, okay, you got your salary, but if you don't spend this money in the next 7 days, poof, it's going to disappear. That's another issue I have with CBDCs. As to whether they'll roll it out, this is a little bit above my pay grade, but I've had some guests on, like Tom Luongo, and he's saying that they tried to bring CBDCs, but they overplayed their hands in the US, because a CBDC would basically be the central bank would work directly with the end user, the customer, and the commercial banks would be basically out of business. And this is why the commercial banks got behind Donald Trump in the US, and it's a big part of the reason why he won. Again, above my pay grade. But what I'm saying is, they tried to roll it out and they failed. Doesn't mean they won't try it again. If you get Mark Carney in, maybe they will implode the economy, roll out a new currency, but call it a CBDC, like, trade in $100, you get 100 credits or 110 credits kind of thing. And then once they've got you hooked, it's a lot harder. Like, it's very difficult. I have a Silver Eagle, $45 silver coin. It's hard to pay for a Netflix account with that, and they know that.
Yeah. Okay. You know what? Next time, you and I are going to dive deeper into this, because I feel like we just pulled the lid off of something that we need to go deeper into. And I'm out of focus again, fucking camera. And I'm not going to cut this out. Sorry, everybody. I think I need a new camera. Peyman, my brother, I love everything you do. I love everything you represent. I love everything about you. If I lived in West Vancouver, I would figure out a way to vote for you 50 times. I think you are one of the people who has it right. I think when it comes to commentators and just people with a political opinion in this country, you are one of the few people that I really trust, because I know that in your heart, you are really about individual liberty and freedom. And I think that everything that you say and every position that you take is very well thought out, and that you spend a lot of time considering these things. And I am very, very happy to call you a friend, my brother. I feel very privileged that I can reach out to you at any time and, pull you in here and make you talk to me. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. Before I do that, thank you for the kind words. You are doing great work, Jason. I mean,
Thank
your
you,
work with Sam Cooper, your guests, but it's sort of the same thing. Like, I think Canada needs more people like you. So if we got even 1% of the population to do what you're doing, we'd be in a far better place. So you're doing God's work.
Thank you.
As for people, you can go to my website, peymanaskari.ca. You can donate to the Hungry Candidates Foundation, peymanaskari.ca/donate. My podcast is on YouTube at Inlay Terms, and I'm most active on social media. Peyman Askari 451 is my handle. If you want to get a hold of me, send me an email, info@peymanaskari.ca, and I try to respond to all my emails. I'll make myself available.
And listen, guys, check out Inlay Terms. Honestly, it's one of my favorite podcasts. I love it. You have such a brilliant way of distilling down these really complicated concepts, especially when you're talking to everyday average people who are not necessarily public figures and are not necessarily used to speaking in a public forum. You have a very good way of kind of interjecting, translating what they're trying to say, and then raising it up to another level. And check out Inlay Terms with Peyman Askari. I've been on it, I think, 6 times. And
Yeah.
I want that 7th. I'm coming for that 7th. And guys, look, this is the way we do this. This is how we save this thing. I'm go and follow Inlay Terms, watch the show, listen to Peyman go into the details. I love it. I absolutely fucking love it. I am a habitual rewinder of your show. So, Peyman, let's do this again real soon. I want to jump into the CBDC topic with you because I think you have some really good insight. And I think this is the perfect way to end it and kind of leave people on a cliffhanger, but we got to come back and do this again soon.
Join us next week for CBDC.
And there it is. Thanks, brother. It's always nice talking to you, man.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jason. Take care.